Welcome back to Educational Warfare. I'm Dr. Jordan Lauer here with my tag team partner, Dr. Ryan Jackson. We're here at Cadet Toys and Comics. Really exciting show today. We want to, with our great production staff here with us as well, Tommy Ruth as a producer and a director, Matt Paff. Before we get started today, some socials to get out there for you. Follow us on Blue Sky. I'm at Dr. Jordan Lauer. Follow us on X at EDU Warfare. You can watch full video episodes of our show here on Spotify and at our YouTube channel, which is at Educational Warfare. We have everything on there. We have shorts, we have videos, we have some bonus stuff, especially with an episode like today. If new stuff comes out, we might do a little quick pop-on bonus thing just to keep you informed. So get on there, subscribe. That way you can catch everything we do on the show. And today's show is historic. The Department of Education is officially being shut down. Thousands of federal education workers are being let go. Nearly 50% of the workforce already has been let go. On March 11th, they were told by 6 p.m. they had to exit the building. This and that day is going to be a defining moment in American education. The Department of Education is gone. Just to kind of put a little spice in that before we get going, the Chief of Policy and Programs, the Learning Policy Institute, to kind of frame this, Tara Keeney told ABC News that the job cuts that are happening right now will have huge impacts on teachers. So, welcome in.
Hey, man. Yeah, good to be back. We are this is a follow-up.
Yes.
I mean, the last time we discussed this topic, I remember we ended with a wait-and-see kind of vibe, right?
Theorizing.
But we were talking about that smackdown. Linda McMahon, of course, appointed by President Trump. She's now been confirmed. All of that process has gone through. She oversees Department of Education, which we discussed, created back in the 70s under Jimmy Carter. Really this idea to centralize education, for the country, to really provide equity for states, all that jazz. So here we are, wait and see, and that day has kind of come,
right,
or has started. That process has started officially now with those sweeping cuts, and we just kind of start there. I mean, I think that's the the shot across the bow,
right?
Yeah,
I mean, our first one was educational.
You didn't think we were serious,
right?
We're serious.
Yeah, you thought we were just kind of doing like saying, "Oh, this could happen." Well, it's happening.
Right.
We're not saying that we're clairvoyant. We just kind of could read the tea leaves, and now same thing here. We're going to, it's not doom and gloom we're trying to do. It's just what we're trying to do at this point to stay on top of it. We're trying to be relevant because you see this. You have children in school. You're a teacher. You're just involved in the community. You see this happen, and you're probably sitting there going, "Okay, that's a shakeup. What does this mean?" And that's what we're here for.
How much truth can we get to today?
I think that's really. What could it mean? What might it mean? We're not saying anything we say today doesn't mean. If we say negative stuff, I hope to God we're wrong. I really do. I hope it's like if I'm saying this could happen, I hope I'm wrong, right? Because the whole end game here, the whole benefit is American students, American teachers have the best system possible. So if that shakes out of this, cool. I'm not going to be upset. We're not doing this to be on Old Takes Exposed. There's a Twitter account, Old Takes Exposed, where people say stuff about sports, and like you can literally say like the Red Sox. Mookie Betts won't be that good. We'll get rid of them. Old Takes Exposed. Like 2 years later, they'll pop it up and be like, look what this guy said. Nice. We're not trying to be on that. We're not trying to say anything to get out there. We're just literally trying to predict what could happen based on our knowledge, based on stuff people have said, and I think that's important. So you can stay on top of it.
Less of a prediction here and just more of a follow through. I would say this was a campaign promise that Trump had spoken about quite often, and I think we've seen this thread played out in the early days of his presidency.
Right.
He's following through on these campaign promises. This just happens to be
except eggs.
One of the bigger ones. Except what?
Except eggs.
Except eggs, right. We're still paying an exorbitant amount for that. In fact, my mother, God bless her, she was just with me over the weekend. She asked me if I was still eating eggs or are they too expensive for me right now. So, yeah, except eggs. He's working on that, though.
First time in human history somebody said, are eggs too expensive for you? I mean, it's come out of chicken.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy time, And Linda McMahon, we were talking last time we talked, this is our first one was Educational Smackdown. Right now it's, as Linda McMahon steps in the ring. We were wondering if she would even be confirmed. Well, now she is. Right. And this one's, Educational Smackdown too. Now it's the final bells ringing for the Department of Education. They got that, the Trump administration has Department of Education a scorpion deathlock. They're trying to crawl and reach towards the rope to break it, but they're not, and they tapped out. It's ding,
the
ding,
count
ding.
out is going.
Yeah, ding, 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 that's over. So you actually did a great transition to our first thing we were talking about, is this being a campaign promise fulfilled. Right, that's something we talked about. This isn't out of the blue. That's why we're able to do it.
Yeah, nobody should be surprised.
Right.
I mean, it may still be a bit knee jerk how the uncertainty of it all, but shouldn't really surprise anybody at this point.
No. And so, basically to remember for those people who are kind of wondering, Trump vowed early in his campaign to dismantle the Department of Education, advocating, again, not just a hatchet job, but basically what he wants is state and local control of education. Linda McMahon, even when she was coming in upon appointment, right, she began significant layoffs, program dissolutions, redirecting funds. The official White House statement on this is education decisions belong to parents and local communities, not federal bureaucrats, which also need to be aware of kind of the political landscape. I always tell my students when I'm teaching certain things in history, I was like, words matter. So be careful to notice in each time frame what words are being used to do that. And bureaucrat is a word that it's not had a positive connotation.
It has no positive connotation.
Yeah, but it's also now I feel like it's become even more negative. Like almost every bureaucrat is some evil actor who's trying to cause stuff, when the whole point of it, using bureaucrat as kind of a diss earlier was that you're a little cog in a big machine. You don't really do much. You're not a creator. You're just you're stamping the paper.
Yeah.
And now it's become like, oh, you're stamping the paper, but you're also like misallocating funds while you do it. And it's just, I feel bad because a lot of those people are hard workers. So not federal bureaucrats is what they said.
Yeah. Which is interesting, man. On that point right there, because I've thought quite a bit about this, especially the sweeping cuts part, right? And never in a position where you want to see anyone lose their job.
Right.
But you just said, hard-working individuals. And I'm sure some of them were.
Right.
But I'm thinking of educators like yourself that have been in the trenches for years, decades even. Shout out my wife. She'll start year 20, in August.
It's crazy.
So someone that have been in there for such a long time. And had you asked those people, like, are the people at the Department of Education working hard?
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder
right.
what that response would have been 6 months ago, before these kind of announcements were going on. Because what has been interesting is recently, mostly through social media, but it's watching educators or people in education's orbit share what the Department of Education does. Because prior to this,
right.
No one, my friend, and I've been in the principal seat, man, I've been in the teacher seat. No one was arguing for this thing.
Right.
So that has been a big kind of aha moment for me. And sometimes it takes these kind of situations to make you pay attention, to force you to pay attention and understand and learn a bit better. So I think some of that's going on.
Yes, absolutely.
But it also, man, is back to like this. We didn't really care until it was time to care. And now a lot of people care.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons, we can't go into this assuming that, this isn't, President Trump just didn't sit up in bed one day and be like, Department of Education, bad, and do this. These are targeted things. Like they're going after something that has been controversial on both sides, right? And good, stick around for later if you're listening, obviously, because you will learn exactly what the Department of Education kind of did, what its funding went to. So we have that information for you. So if you want to more inform yourself, we got it coming up. So stay tuned for that. But, and if you have an opinion on this, our listeners, leave in the comments on the video, email us at educationalwarfare.pod@gmail.com. Forgot to drop that in the socials, but that is our email address, Educational Warfare.
Yeah, hit us in those comments, though.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in education, you're even a boomer and you were around when the department got created and that argument for why not. Put those in the comments. I would love to hear those perspectives.
Like help shape what we know from what you got, educators out there, parents out there. Just let us know what you thought of it, because they're attacking this. It is bureaucrats, right? It is people working there, so there is a little bit of what is it that you do here, and I get that. So when they're saying we're getting rid of it and taking back the states, there is that.
But
okay,
think about that even on a micro level, right? I know you've heard this, Jordan. I know you have. Your hardworking, in the trenches teacher asking, what does central office do? What do they even do?
right.
What do they spend all their days doing? Oh, they get to go out and have lunch.
Right, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean,
Yeah.
these are the conversations, and that's the underbelly, the undercurrent.
I get 20 minutes.
Right.
If I got to heat up my food, it's
So
a rush
that
lunch.
drills down all the way to the local level. You're just now asking people to start analyzing and paying attention to what these people do at the federal level when the reality is no one knows.
No, and
that's gotten them into this situation that
absolutely
I think we find themselves in now.
And that's the thing is that it's transparency and stuff. And a lot of people, the problem with it is, you might be saying, well, you just built their case to do this. Like, yeah, okay. And I don't think anybody's has a problem with getting rid of not inflation prices, but bloat in agencies, right? That are causing
trim the fat,
extra stuff. Yeah, nobody's afraid of that. It's just kind of the way it's being done, right? The mass firings, and there's been a lot of information that like. We've seen this already. Like people have been fired from some of these agencies that the administration's going after, and they're not exactly sure what they did either. So they just fire them, and then they're like, "Oh, we kind of need that guy," and then they bring him back, and that's it. It seems almost haphazard. Like when I clean out my closet, I don't take every clothing item out to where it's look like I haven't even moved in yet, and then go through them. I'm like, I'm going through sweaters, and I pull that out. It is a identification and thinning process. Where this is just like, I mean, this can seem to this and many other agencies, you just open up your closet, went nope, and threw a match in there and shut the door. Like, I'll get the fire extinguisher back in here in about 10 minutes, Yeah. And that's just what it seems.
So to hear you almost position it then, and I know this isn't really your take, but it could sound like, the way they're doing it, the ends justify the means.
Yeah,
right?
That's how they're
It sounds like you're arguing a bit more about the inconvenience of the process.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't meet
the haphazardness
expectations, right? Or just the way it's being done. And I don't know, man, from this administration, first term, the immediate pieces of this second term, new term, I just don't know that they've shown us anything different. Again, back to not being surprised necessarily.
Right.
We're going to rip this Band-Aid off, come hell or high water, and wait and see what happens. But one thing they're sticking to in terms of, sticking to their guns is the model hasn't been working.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just going to hear that rhetoric continually. The model hasn't been working. Argue that it's been working. That's going to be their take, is their stance.
Why do we need this?
Yeah, why we need to do this and why we need to do it, now.
Right. And that's, you actually just said, like the quote you just said, the mass firings, what are we talking about? 1,300 employees were let go with severance packages unclear. They were basically last Tuesday, March 11th, that day we were talking about, which is going to be a big day probably in history, especially for education, could be. They were told to vacate the building by 6 p.m. on March 11th. So this was hey, get out really quick. And that's what some people are saying. It's like, whoa, like these people worked here for a while. It is and nobody's shocked due to the understanding of, President Trump's background. But this is very much like a corporate merger or a corporate takeover. Mm-hmm. Your company gets bought by another company and there's uncertainty. And then there's a lot of times mass layoffs because you're redundant because this company that bought you obviously had those positions. And it seems like that. The problem is a lot of people feel is, government's not a business, and that's my biggest thing I've been saying is like a lot of people are like, well, we have this huge, deficit, like we're in debt to 36 trillion, if you were that in debt, you'd go to jail or you wouldn't be able to pay anything. The government is not a business.
Right.
The government is not a personal account. There's not a government in the world that doesn't have debt. Some have more, some have less. And when you're the biggest one out there, you're going to get debt. It's all about the debt you have in return, right? Now, do you have to have some like as large? No, you can cut that back. But just saying we have to slash these things because we have this big deficit, that's not the way it looks. It's not like me if I'm I can't pay my bills, I better cut Netflix.
But it is fair to say, I mean, as a capitalist society, mm-hmm. the government not only impacts business, but has become an instrument that we expect will impact business. I mean, case in point with the tariffs, that are going on right now.
Right.
I mean, government plays a significant role in directing, redirecting, shifting, influencing, creating business prospects, outcomes.
And I mean, so this is a very, like, you can, like, this is a pick a side issue, right? Like, you could have it. So I mean, Republicans are calling it a win, of course. States' rights, reduction in federal overreach that they're saying. One current senior Department of Education official just appointed there with the new administration stated that the massive reforms will help the department get funding to the states in a more cost-efficient way, saying, quote, and this is exactly what you just said a minute ago, what we are doing now is not working. It's just not. So it's time for a change. That's what's starting tonight, is that change. On the other hand, Democrats warn of chaos, which, you kind of see the fear of that. No federal oversight for student loans. That's going away. Special education, Title IX.
Right.
What they've been saying, many people on this side have been saying, teachers will be more overworked and the struggle to accommodate student demands.
Go with me here. Go with me here on this idea. Okay, so I'm gonna get big on you. I'm gonna get a little metaphorical.
That's good.
Okay,
like deep
come on.
Thoughts.
So what I'm thinking of right now is it's not working. That's their rhetoric. That's going to be the party line. Okay. But what comes next after that thought is what's not working, why it's not working. Those are the two questions. What's not working, why it's not working. And as I peel that onion, I think of No Child Left Behind. Go with me here on this through line. And I'm going to make a Star Wars analogy. I'm a nerd about it, man. Our producers, man, they're Star Trek nerds. I'm low level, man. I'm low tech. I'm soft sci-fi. So go with me here on this loose analogy.
I got all Star Wars knowledge you need. So
okay, man. So I'm bringing it. Hopefully there's some fans out there would love your ideas and our comments about this analogy I'm about to make here. So if you remember No Child Left Behind, Bush era, and I'm talking Bush Jr., right? W.
Yeah.
No Child Left Behind. And I'm involved in education at that standpoint, right? I get involved in education about 2005 ongoing. So No Child Left Behind really ramps up. I mean, standardized testing. I remember in Tennessee specifically, we got held to this truth in advertising kind of deal where we said we were doing well, but then when we baselined it, we weren't. So standards change. No Child Left Behind becomes this rigorous slog of assessments that are still carried through with fidelity today, right? So under that umbrella, under that thumb, we have gotten into this doctrine of teaching to the test, accountability. People lose their jobs because of this work. Okay. But then here come now 20 years later, and I'm going to bring you back to this Star Wars analogy. We're now screaming, it doesn't work. It's not working. Okay. So a metaphor here for me is it's like, in Star Wars, the prequels, which people of my generation typically hate, but in those prequels, the Sith, the bad guys, they are architecting this army of clones that have these inhibitor chips that are ultimately going to do what?
All bad things. Take out the Jedi.
Dismantle the Jedi.
Execute
literally
66.
Exterminate them. But it's this ruse where they actually get the Jedi to embrace this clone army, using them, adopting them, dying for them.
Embedding them.
Quite literally, when the switch is flipped. So you can't just help feeling a little bit, man, like what is happening here in terms of what we said is wrong and why it's wrong, and us needing to make this significant change now.
Right.
It just feels a little bit like this. Man, has there been this larger conspiratorial piece?
Big plan?
At play, right, big plan. Now, again, that's why I'm having a bit of fun with this particular analogy here, but it's just got shades of this kind of conspiratorial nature to it. When I think of the it's not working argument, that's not good enough for me because there's a lot of GOP fingerprints.
Yeah, in this. Was this a long thing? Hey.
Man, the long play on this potentially could be, just
out there. Yeah. And it does make you wonder that because you see, like, there are some people who are able to think that way. Hey, set this up. If it doesn't work, then we can get it back. You see states have that to where, how do you battle some of these, quote unquote, culture wars that we're dealing with now?
So I think at the very least, for me, if they're going to take that hard stamp, it's not working. You never really get this in politics, but this kind of bipartisanship, like, look, we'll take full ownership. I mean, hey, that No Child Left Behind deal. I mean, man, that's on us, and we really implanted that. We wanted to see that through. We've realized now, 20 years later, but that's not what they're saying necessarily. It's just, it's not working, and really pinning it on bureaucrats in your example as those
going after this. And again, the whole point of this is to try to get everything back to the states, right? And that's where a lot of people support it, because they think there's this big government overreach thing from Washington, D.C., and it's affecting, and they wanted the decisions back in the states. But that, we were there. We talked about the last episode, this Department of Education created in the 70s, Jimmy Carter, right? So we were there prior, and there's a reason we went away. We had a lot of different things being taught. So we have a very pluralistic society, and we have people from different places of our own country having different viewpoints. And we've never had national standards, right? We have these testing standards, but it's not like we have this is what you teach in history. Each state still gets to pick that. So this overreach we're seeing is that, the question is this just a straw man? Like, is this, here's your scapegoat, the Department of Education? Because states have still decided what standards are. States have still decided a lot. School boards still decide these smaller, minute issues. The Department of Education,
let's stay on
money.
Let's stay on that straw man idea for a minute. And before this announcement, before his presidency, before his first presidency, okay, was there arguments about the state of education? Was there belly aching about the state of education? Yeah. Okay. On the ground level, within education, from teachers, was there arguments? Was there belly? Right, there have been. So during that time, who are we railing against?
The Department of Education.
I mean, you see how real quickly, man,
it flips.
It does, buddy. And that to me, I think I struggle with, because, again, I'm going to go back to the most recent social media post where people are coming out of the blue to, like, defend and argue what the Department of Education does, where it just wasn't that long ago. That's who they would have been railing against.
These programs coming down, some of these things.
It's low-hanging fruit. It's an easy target for both sides.
Absolutely.
But this side has now chosen that target as its primary objective.
And sliced it.
And now, because of the uncertainty and the chaotic approach to doing it, here we are.
Yeah, and it'd be one thing if it was just, it's because some of the things Department of Education does that a lot of people are scared. I mean, again, it's the style plan, like you said. You just slashed it, and then it's like, all right, and now it's like everybody's like, whoa, what does this mean for this? Typically, government, our founding fathers, you read the Federalist Papers, our founding fathers wanted government to be achingly slow. Like, that was the whole premise. It's not, that's why the House has 2-year terms and the Senate has 6, because the House is supposed to be reactionary. Something bad happens, I get elected because I talk most about it. I go up there, I try to change that. The Senate's job is to pull back and go, I got to look at the 6-year plan here.
Right.
The 10-year plan. So, and they bounce against each other. And then there's a process, the courts and everything. They want it to be slow, because quick reactions in government, it's just like driving a car. You start to slide a little bit. You overreact. You oversteer. You're spinning.
They're mitigating impulsivity and everything that comes with that.
Like, slashing it like this is a fear, because it's like a lot of people, if you would have come out after, but again, they're preying on this one type of people, our society now, instant gratification.
Sure.
2, an easy target, because like you said, it's flip-flop back and forth, good, bad, Department of Education, people like it, they don't like it. And they're just kind of going after it because it can make people happy. It's a quick cut. It's been a villain before. And so slashing it. But a lot of people are like, whoa, like, you can't just slash this huge, part of this. It'd be like if all of a sudden you got a letter, hey, the bank that has your mortgage and all that is closing. We don't have a plan for where your money's going to go yet. You'd freak out. Right. And it's just because that's where your money is. Am I going to owe my mortgage?
Right.
Am I going to get this? And that's kind of what's happening.
Yeah.
Now, if they send a letter in 6 months, we'll do this. And then it's your money's transitioning to this bank. You're like, okay, whatever. My debit card changes. And that's what, if it would have been handled that way. But then they're not getting their goal of, look at the changes we're making. Look at the fast. We're slashing waste. And again, when you do stuff quickly, there's going to be some some screw ups, right? And that's the thing. Is like, is this a heel or a hero? Like, is Linda McMahon, is this going to make a heel or a hero? What happens next? So let's talk about real quick some of the things that are going to happen with this.
Yeah,
like, what does this exactly mean? Okay. So first thing, the biggest thing the Department of Education does is federal funding, right? Federal comes down. They can offer different type of grants. There's money. And you might say, okay, well, why can't the states do that? Well, this is how the federal money is kind of how the Department of Education could steer education in ways they wanted the country to do as a whole, right? So you want this money
the way they want
right?
it.
Yeah, you want this money, do this. That's the thing.
Right.
There's a villain thing.
Slide that in.
Yeah, I mean the way because you have 50 different states who get to control it, but if you're trying to say, hey, we need your standardized testing data, so so you want this money. Take this, make sure to take a standardized test and provide us with data.
Stick.
Right, and that's what it is. And so that's what they're really doing. Other than that, I mean, so you have Title I. So Title I, for anybody who doesn't know, that's low-income student aid. That's breakfast at lunches. Also, though, one of the programs they cut right before they did this was $1 billion for feeding kids in schools. They said it was not necessary. And that's just one of those things that's like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like all the research, all the data shows that kids learn better when they're not worried about food. And you could say, oh, that's the parents' problem. We, as teachers, if you're not a teacher, your brain probably went like, well, that should be the parent, not taxpayers. That's we could say that for everything. It's just the fact is that these are kids who a lot of them don't have that say. So when you say, oh, it's the parents' problem, it is. But you can't just have a kid struggling.
For educators, it's very pragmatic because in order to get the best outcome from a kid to optimize the learning situation, you want to make sure they've eaten Maslow's basic rung there. So we're always perpetually going to make that argument. Why? Because it directly interfaces with our jobs.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we know what it's like when a kid is hangry. I mean, he hasn't eaten. And it's unfortunate, man, because that argument, the one you and I are discussing right now, is going to be timeless. It's going to be polarizing. Yeah. We're never really going to get anywhere.
Feed kids.
But that's the stuff that we end up getting tripped up on when these things, and we never really kind of get past those issues.
Yeah, and they cut that, and like I said, it's you have those kids in there, and but then like you said, it's part of our job. So it's like, oh well, research shows, scientific research. Kids do better when they have food in their stomach and aren't thinking about food. But then they're like, well, that's not useful. That's a parent's problem. But then, hey, your kids aren't doing well in state tests. Well, they're hungry. And mom and dad,
that's the school's issue.
Yeah, the mom and dad ain't going to fix that right now. Like some parents can't. Some parents won't. We could pin it on 100 different things. So let's take care of that. If you want this result over here of test score, then fix this
with this
easy thing,
piece.
right? So that's sometimes like Title I, but it's also supplies, not just food. It's supplies, it's extra learning resources. It just says your school has a large percentage of low-income students. We're going to here's some federal money to help serve them better, right? Because they don't have the things more affluent to. So that's what Title I does. IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, which kind of looking at some like some tweets that came out and some things like that. Literally, Linda McMahon was on Fox News, and she was talking about how her efforts to dismantle the Department of Education, what it's going to mean, and then she said it'll affect some funds that'll go back to states or people with disabilities. She said IDEA, and then the host said, "What does that stand for?" And she's like, "I couldn't really tell you."
Yeah,
which is a big, because IDEA that brings money for special education.
Yeah, and that one's irksome, well beyond irksome actually, because anyone who has applied, interviewed, tried to get, a position of any type really, but certainly something of stature and significance. I mean, you're expected, right, to have a basic understanding of what you're doing. And there's no way you could befuddle your way through an interview and not know some major cornerstones of this big thing you're about to lead. So to your point, when you hear that, it's certainly knee-jerk.
She said, "I'm only been on the job 5 days." Like this is not an obscure. I'd get it. There's everything. Yeah, there's a lot of acronyms.
Talking about
this is a
disabilities. Americans.
This was a monumental. This is what for those people are like. This is one of the bills that took special education students out of the boiler room in the basement, just kind of being babysat. And help get them services and test their level so that maybe they can push into a normal classroom to get the best education. Because prior to that, you want to look up how some special education students were treated prior to this, 70s, 60s, 80s, it's kind of dark. Like it's
not only kind of dark, but it's why you've run into these generations of parents and families that did not have a good school experience.
Oh, absolutely.
And a lot of the underbelly is, before some of these changes were made, just how kids were treated in general.
Yeah.
But specifically, if you struggled, academically, if you had a learning disability, your road was arduous.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, tough. You know, and that stuff carries, man. It's a stain and imprint on those people.
School was not a thing that you had some like happy memories, kind of what you went to while your parents were gone. You know what I mean? Like, and now it's so much more inclusive, and that's the thing. That's some of the knocks that are happening, is that she doesn't even know what that is, but she's cutting funding to it. Like, where's that? How's it being? And that's the thing. Not having a plan scares people, because if you have a child with a disability and you're hearing now IDEA funds are going to states, how's that being split out? Are the states going to use it with fidelity for my child? The federal government has that, like, they're being looked at. It's a lot easier to hide in a little corner of our, again, look at it like Louisiana, like, unless something crazy happens, a lot easier to kind of ignore that and not do things than is the federal government not having, like, hey, my kid's not being serviced. Like, that's one of the things that this does. It's an oversight thing. It's looking over that. Now you have to the argument is, well, it's so big it has to cover all this. Of course it's going to get that. The counter argument is, now you have to check 50 different places if they're doing it. Instead of one kind of doing, like, naturally doing that its job. Now individually, whatever organization is, because they're still going to have something in the federal government that peeks over this. They're just going to give it to another department, right? There'll still be some part of some department. Now you have to look at 50. Are you guys doing it? Are you guys doing it instead of a federal, like, blanket? This has to be done. And it's still going to stay a law. I'm not saying IDEA's going away, but it's just the way that money's given out becomes nebulous, and that's scary when your child depends on those funds. Pell grants are a thing, so those are kind of like the federal funding. So who's taking over? The states is what this is going to, and that's the plan, going to the states. Again, a big part of Trump's much maligned Project 2025. Was he connected? Wasn't he connected? This is a big part of it. So again, some of that federal funding, could it go to the private school funding? We talked about that as a thing. And another part of this, right?
Well, that's already happening.
Right. It's happening each state.
With the voucher programs.
Yeah.
And
it's
those
states.
bills are being passed, man. It's a new day in regards to that. So this is in line, with that kind of thinking that's already happening. Yeah.
And a big thing a lot of people don't understand or don't think about, one of the big things we talked about before that the Department of Education did was student loans. That's who ran that. That's who kind of calculated that. So Biden's Save Student Loan Program is now under fire. Will that be completely wiped out, which is super scary to anybody? I mean, if you have been using that to any way, like, do you still get that savings? I mean, you could think about it. The Save program, because of all the legal affairs, there was, like, it's been off and on. Like, you're making a payment, now it's, like, kind of frozen while courts look at it, then it's still frozen, then COVID hit. So a lot of these people are like, hey, my loan number because of the Save plan is this amount for this many years. What happens if, and they tried to make that as reasonable as possible, people, because, again, people with student loans, who is it? The middle class, most likely, right? Who drives our economy? The middle class. So the whole thinking behind the Save program, a lot of people are like, I don't want to pay other people's loans. Well, if I'm paying $600 a month to pay for college to be able to do a job that I do, I'm not going out and spending money in the economy, which means our whole economy goes down. If you have a large part of the middle class do that, and that's some problem. So could these payments now shoot up? Like, could the calculations that Save did go away? And now it's like, this is what you owe, this how many years you have to pay it. Here's this cold calculated $750 a month. If that happens to me, I don't know what I'm going to be doing.
Yeah.
Like, one of my kids may not get braces. And that's scary.
Well, and the downstream effects on that too, I think, are going to be interesting to analyze. Post-secondary education, colleges are already on shaky ground.
Right.
And you're starting to see, sweeping layoffs at major universities, first and foremost. But they're already on shaky ground in terms of enrollment. I think more importantly, in terms of the perception of college. Is it still valuable? Like, that is now in 2025 a bona fide question.
And
people are asking.
Yeah.
Is it still valuable, worth it? So here we are going to go from this idea that, yeah, sure, I guess it's worth it if it's free.
Yeah.
Or back to, is it worth it and I'm now going to pay this premium? Because remember, we put that premium on it at the front end because it was so valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
But now we've gone through generations of getting degrees. You used the word nebulous earlier. I love that word. But, just getting a general English degree or some of these degrees, man, that are so expensive and they yield next to nothing. Mm-hmm. It's put us in this really strange space of, oh, man, if my college isn't free, am I going?
Yes.
Because I don't want to live the rest of my life. And again, I'm not going to sit here like a hypocrite, man. As a principal, I was really transparent with students about this. That's why the Hope Scholarship becomes so significant. That's why the Tennessee Promise to me was so significant. I mean, at least those were avenues to get you access to post-secondary without a lifetime of indentured servitude,
right?
Essentially,
yeah. And that's some of the student loan argument. Some people are like, well, I worked and all this. I worked two jobs. I paid off my loan and nobody helped me out. Your house also cost $27,000.
Yeah.
That same house today is $400. Like, our society made these things required. You know what I mean? Like, if you're a teacher and you don't have a master's, you are making minimum wage for the hours you work. If you calculate, probably less than minimum wage. So you almost have to get a master's to even make a positive in your salary.
But it's hard to fault the universe, essentially, man, to reacting to this calculus of things where are the degrees that we're getting yielding professional outcomes that match what we paid for them.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's this kind of idea that we're sort of in right now. It's like, is what has been happening working? Back to their argument, it's not working, versus do we want to pay for it? Do we not want to pay for it? The value of what you're saying it's worth versus the perceived value. Man, it's all of it is sort of, to me, the universe responding to, it's been going like this for a long time.
Yep.
And now so much is changing so quickly. We haven't even dropped AI, into this particular conversation yet, but so much is changing in terms of how young people learn, what they're choosing to study and learn, and why. And then you've got college, student loan debt in the swirl of that. And to me, it's one of those easiest things we can say, yep, don't need that.
Yeah. And I think it can, and that's just the when you're talking about the savings and everything. There does need to be a recalculation, because those type of degrees are too expensive for what they give you. But also, again, we've established that, and not just we as America, Western society has established more education, better opportunities. It's a status thing. It is something that we strive for. And if we stop that, if we aren't we putting, like, is the Enlightenment dead? You know what I mean? Like, are we out of the age of reason? And that's the fear, is like, okay, we do need to adjust it. And that's where, we get in this nebulous thing. But again, people are scared because those payments, if they shoot up, there's no other plan. I mean, you're talking about alienating a voting group. Wait till the middle class is too broke.
But I like how you use the age of enlightenment there as an argument, which is cool, because I get why you're doing that. But then I think of
history nerd.
Go with me here, man. I think of your age of enlightenment, and I even think of not even so much deep history, but beatniks, coffee shops, discussing ideas, poetry, that kind of vibe, right? Go with me there. And then I'm thinking of today's youth that would be in that age of enlightenment kind of idea. And dude, it's gig economy, ride shares,
we're going to gig
scrolling.
Economy,
Like, are they really in these age of enlightenment kind of mindsets where that's just not true, man?
Oh, I know.
I don't think.
I totally get. Yeah, and it's already, I think, the way our society's going, it's slowing down. And
because I'm going back to your argument about pricing. It's like, well, you said, nobody helped me out. That's cool, man, because your house didn't cost $680,000. It cost $32,000. Right, and that's kind of today's people too mindset, though. I'm gonna have to get the most beneficial thing for me, and for a lot of people that means piecemealing things together, bootstrapping it to make it work. And I just don't know, man, that we're in this kind of idyllic
Oh yeah, totally.
Age of Enlightenment kind of. I don't know, man. The ship may have sailed on,
I think
that era.
I think it has, but you just don't want to close it. If that population shrinks to we still have a small group, that's fine. But you also just don't want to cut that off.
I hear you, man, and I also don't want to sound like I'm not advocating for that or wish that was still, current, relevant. I just don't see it necessarily. And it reminds me, man, of filmmaker Harmony Korine. I think I've brought this up before, who makes this argument recently that film is a dying medium. And that's sad to a guy like me who grew up as just a cinephile. I mean, love movies still to this day. So he's of our age group, filmmaker, and makes the argument film as a medium is dying because your best talent, your top talent, your young talent, they're not making they're not storytelling in this traditional format.
Right.
It's now
short.
Very much this driven. It's short is just a great way to put it, and we're losing those minds to that.
Yeah. I had that argument with my wife the other day. I was like, she asked something. She's like, I think there's a show about this girl who like killed her kids, and I was like that's the problem right there. I was like, that we watch this stuff that's like, that's terrible, sad, don't want, like couldn't even imagine, right? But those type of like true crime stuff have shoved to the forward where nobody's making, like, where people are watching that now. That's what they want to see instead of like watching this art that was created, dialogue, right, and tension and all that. There is no of characters that are created, you have, and that's how you learn how to talk and how to think and how to maneuver situations. If you just sit there and blindly watch it, and then Jessica got angry and took her kids into the woods, it's like you just read it. It's basically somebody reading the newspaper to you, instead of like thinking and imagining and like watching these situations happen. And I think that's part of.
Now, could you make an argument that what you just described right there, and how we've gotten to that point as a consumer of storytelling, right? And we've all grown up through this education system that we're in, and we still landed.
And that's what people want.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I think it's the lowest. Yeah, I mean, people always want. I mean, we used to take people to executions, like when the guillotine was running.
Yeah, I mean, look,
there's a French guy with an 8-year-old on his shoulder.
If
like,
it bleeds,
buddy.
it leads.
Yeah.
Was a saying for a long time in journalism for a reason.
Right.
I mean, people are just more attracted to that. That's why the algorithm supports certain kind of content. All that jazz, man. And we're putting this through the lens of Department of Education pulling back funding, and then what that pullback is going to mean. We started this whole tangent on student loans, which you can't help but then start making an argument for or against post-secondary, which has been going on now for the past 5 to 6 years. So it's slippery slopes, man, all around this thing.
Oh, there is. With the Department of Education, like possibly being gone, again, with the student loan thing, it's just, will loans be affected? When will I be expected to pay? What will I be expected to pay? So there's a large segment of people are just kind of staring at this, like clicking refresh on their FAFSA page, seeing what the payments will be or when it'll kick in, and it does affect things. There's also Title IX, for females and sexual assault. They want to roll back protections for transgender students and sexual assault survivors as part of that. You could stop enforcing all this. Like once it's out of the Department of Education's hands, Title IX still exists, but now, boop, push it to the state. Like y'all got to enforce that. And that's a thing that's happening. So it's basically when you're thinking about this, right? So you have federal funding for special education, student loans, Title IX, Title I. You have this funding. So who are the winners, right? Out of this educational smackdown, the final bells, whose arms being raised in the ring? Private schools. All right, conservative-led states, right? And now they're being able to kind of push these things. Corporations offering education solutions. So now you have, instead of one, each state still picks their things they use, but the Department of Education kind of like, here's a big blanket thing. Now it's a feeding frenzy because now you have 50 different places you could send your stuff.
Right, but I'm still going to argue there's nothing new in that scenario.
No, there's not.
I mean, third-party educational partners have been benefiting off of failure for as long as I've been in the profession.
Yeah. I mean, the newest and biggest winner of this is the private/charter schools, voucher programs, because that is now, hey, this is states are there. How are they going to affect it without the Department of Education kind of saying, whoa, watch this. How are we going to see that change?
And I feel like what you're saying right there is, again, we've mentioned this before, is like the very beginning, early stages, just incubating stages here of what the new model's probably going to look like.
Right. Yeah. And that's the goal. I mean, you literally, so you look at this, like, so let's slide into kind of, the battle at the state level, right? Is this going to be tag teams or states like we all work together? Is it be like a cage match where we're trapped in this and we got to like fight to even get out? Like some states we're going to rise. Texas, Florida, and Tennessee are ready to roll. We already have voucher stuff there. California, New York, Illinois are fighting back, like their state emerging state level funding plans for public schools because of the losers there. If we talked about it, who are the losers we just mentioned? Public schools, basically. How is this going to affect them? Where funds shifting, if charter schools start popping up, how do public schools get state funds? Number of kids.
Yeah.
So now you're talking about like just through that school that's already kind of struggling could get less money. So low income students, again, when there's not food that is provided, I can't ask 12-year-old, well, you're hungry, talk to your parents about.
And there's an old saying,
it's not fair.
People vote with their feet.
Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So people vote with their feet. Because I want to go back to the argument you said, who's gonna lose there? It's gonna be public schools because private charters are getting more students, and then you say why? Because how do schools get funded? Per pupil basis, right? Which goes back to the argument, like, is the government a business? Peel that. Is education a business?
Yep.
So the short answer on that,
starting to be yes.
If we're ultimately talking about number of kids gets us funding, and now this competitor is stealing our clients, our customers, right? Which is bringing money to them, not us.
Right.
Man, just again, it brings us back into that question of is this a business? Brings us back to, is it working?
Yep.
Because if the answer was yes, it's working, would people be making those switches?
Those choices, yeah.
Now, there's lots of different reasons why families make those choices to pull kids from traditional, into charters. I'm just going for this oversimplistic kind of yes or no.
Right.
But if it was working for you,
would this be a discussion?
It wouldn't probably be a discussion. Right. So there's still going to be those that can argue, but is it working, man?
Right. Well, yeah, and it's definitely it definitely has that, again, that two-sided thing. It's like nothing we're saying. You're going to pick a side. We're just trying to give all the information.
Yeah, yeah. You really just want to try to understand it clearly from both sides.
Yeah. So we have those. Like we have, if you look at that, who's already Texas, Florida, Tennessee, all red states ready to roll. California, New York, Illinois, typically blue states. They're fighting back. Swing states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Arizona, the schools left scrambling. And President Trump has even said if states who don't do this and this won't get the money. So it's like, so they're like, what do we do? So. And this all goes back.
That's funny though, man. You're jogging my memory, man. I know you've been in Tennessee for a while. I can't remember how long, but there was a time not too long ago when a particular superintendent in a county you're very familiar with stood up to the state, and said, "We're not going to do this."
Yes.
And the state in turn said, "Then we're not going to fund you."
Yeah. And that's the power of the purse.
And it was about standardized testing.
And that's exactly, so an argument here is that's what the Department of Education can do to level states. When a state says, yo, we're not doing this, Department of Education is like, all right, we're not going to fund you in that. Find it yourself. And they're looking at their budget like, oh, crap. Like, we can't. Well, we rely on that. So then they kind of have to fall in line with those bigger things. Now, do you like the bigger things? That's an argument. But again, the unchecked, what you said, is it a business, right? And that's what all goes for. For our listeners, again, let us know what you think in the comments, just some ideas. But we have a great episode on charter schools and vouchers. What are they? Go listen to that on our YouTube channel. But this kind of boils back that this is a plan to this is privatization of education.
But people tend to want convenience, man. People tend to want comfort and convenience, and out of that comes proximity. So you're talking about going big to small, going macro, federal level, micro, state level, local LEAs. Man, people want to be able to influence someone close to them about their pain point.
Yeah.
My kid in this school, and who can I get to that can hear my pain point and potentially impact that, right? You're not getting anyone at the federal level to hear your pain point. And I think just for so many people, it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
No one's listening to us. No one's hearing us. So it's back to constituencies. It's back to who do I have at this hyper local level that's hearing my pain point.
Mm-hmm.
So when we drill down to this current era, it's going to be those people are like, even on my local level, they don't hear my pain point. And that's scary for some populations especially.
It is.
And as a parent of a student with disabilities, I can easily get into that group pretty quickly. Like, I'm going to need these things moved on for my son based on work that's been going on historically, protection.
And that's a lot of the fears, just the unknown. Again, you just slashed it. We have no idea.
Yeah.
There's not a plan laid out. There's not a memo that say, hey, these people are fired now. Also, the Department of Education is shutting down. People are like, what? And again, with these high-level things, children with disabilities, that's not a line item in some. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of people with children, and they want their children to have the best education possible. Student loans. That's the entire middle class mostly.
And some of it is Pandora's box, man. Like, I think, special education, also known as exceptional education, when that box opens officially, like, yes, these disabilities are real.
Mm-hmm.
We don't hide them anymore. You made mention of that, right? We used to put them in the portables, in the boiler room.
Yeah, just wherever.
That era was true, man.
Mm-hmm.
Dark period. But that Pandora's box is open, man.
Right.
And I'm going to have to put kind of RFK in this conversation a little bit. You're just not going to tell people today that these things aren't real anymore.
Right.
It is what it is.
Can't rewrite that
part. It's just already out there. So although I think there's going to be some of that coming, I just think you have a lion's share, just too many people saying, no, our people are affected by this.
Let me go, I could go if it does get privatized. That's fine. You have a special situation, you have to send your child to the special school. It costs more.
Yeah.
Here's a loan through our partner.
There you go.
That's how you privatize.
You get education loans. And the education loan isn't for college anymore, which is nebulous and what outcome. Now it's to get your child the specific needs they met. They need. Met.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of people say, well, isn't it federal law? Don't you have to get that? Yes, as of right now. Could that change? You know what I mean? Like, we're in the era of executive order. You could change that temporarily because that is funding. Then you get Congress. Right now we have all three tiers are held by the GOP. White House, House of Reps, Senate. So there's a conservative majority in the Supreme Court. So when you're talking about, it's a law, you can't change it. I mean, be careful. Like, every level is controlled by one party. It's easier to change a law than you'd think now. That's why we have two parties, is to balance each other out. And people voted for that. There's nothing wrong with that system. I'm just saying it's the easiest time. Like, if it was split 50-50, Senate Republican, House Democrat, then I'd be like, that's going to be an uphill battle. Right now, it's not. So, and then we go to that privatization thing. And let me throw this out to you and see what you kind of think. Is we're talking about privatization. We're talking about going to the states. And that's what this whole thing's about. Department of Education, this big monolith that could be good or bad or whatever you wanted to make it, is now your state. Okay. States start changing. And this is from the great who was, you kind of say a comedian, people like roll their eyes, but I think George Carlin was.
I thought you were going to say Andrew Dice Clay. For
right, that's a little different. That's a comedian. A lot of people. George Carlin's a little more erudite. Like, he's a philosophical. He said they don't want, they being the powers that be, not the current ones, just anybody. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. That doesn't help them. That's against their interests. They want obedient workers. That sound like, kind of like gig economy stuff, right? Like more people just trying to survive.
Task rabbits.
Right? They want people who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasing crappier jobs, keep this PC, and now they're coming for your Social Security money. And that is a while back. Like, obviously George Carlin's been dead for a while.
Right.
So just seeing that, I mean, that's exactly what's kind of happening. And that's the fear is, this is conspiratorial, right? This is kind of, but you're thinking big picture is, does it make it easier if states do this and have these because again, there's no federal push unless, again, it's all hypothetical, unless they push it to another thing. How are state testing scores to be shown now? Do you have to turn it in? Isn't the easiest way to move America up the branch is not have one federal number that filters all this, like, well, here's America's scores, of having states kind of turn in their own. It's like when you had your students grade their own papers, you never trusted it 100%. You always had to do something crazy like, here's a red pen if there's any scribbles, I'll mark it wrong. You know what I mean? Like, you had to let them know, don't be changing answers. You know, and it's kind of like, could states do that? Be like, oh yeah, they don't test certain kids.
So there's that scenario versus an ever-changing bar that we're constantly chasing, that ebbs and flows, that we never seem to hit, or if we do, then it changes, and now, you know, it's all cyclical, man.
Right.
I just think you can argue for or against way too easily for us to truly defend this thing.
Right.
That like 3 years ago, 6 years ago,
was the bad guy.
Even
could be the bad guy,
depending which side you fence you're on. Both are going to rail against it.
You know, not many people of any. There are many Republicans who did not like No Child Left Behind.
The irony is not lost on me seeing people. Well, let me tell you what they actually do, bro. 4 months ago, you couldn't tell people what this thing actually did, and
and again, I think it's more of, and that's a great point you make. It's not a defending the Department of Education episode. Again, because that would be make me a hypocrite, because I've talked bad about it before too. I think it's more of discussing and defending a little more long-term or more explained way of doing this, because this is more than anything. This is our kids, and what do they always say? Like, don't talk about kids. You know what I mean? Like, you mess with people's kids, that's when people vote with their feet. Start having kids not do well or not get the same things they want. You want to see people vote for whatever party has the opposite plan. So that'll happen. So it's really showing like, hey, it's more of, whoa, it's not so much Department of Education, it's where are we going here? Now it's a big question mark. Before we had Department of Education, here's what they do, good or bad, you could label it. Now it's question mark. That's what's floating up there. And we don't know. And that is scary to a lot of people, because these are things that are, they affect your pocketbook. They affect your child at home. They affect the future of our country. And if it's not done right,
well, just take the top two, finances and family. It's impacting both of those things. Highly sensitive, emotional, hot button issues. So there's a reason why we're doing this episode twice, because we know essentially how significant it is. And I'll say significant because I don't believe you should throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
I mean, slow down. You make the argument about like impulsivity and what's happening right now. I think one could easily make the argument, due to bureaucracy, big sweeping changes in government rarely, if ever, happen because of bureaucracy. Why? Because you're only in there for X amount of years, and then before you know it, it's, we didn't get half the stuff done that we want. Whatever. So instead, this particular regime takes this approach of, man, we're just ripping the Band-Aid off. We are throwing the baby out with the bathwater, which is causing so much.
Later.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to use the word intellectuals, for those critical thinkers, to your point, it's our concern about the downstream effects of doing something without caution.
Right.
We just don't know if the effects will be irreversible in some regards. And I'm going to pinpoint an issue real quick that I know you're familiar with. We talk about special ed under IDEA, IEPs, individualized education plans, but there's also a thing known as 504s, which I know you're familiar with. So these are it's like special ed light.
Right.
All right. It's not even really special ed. Let's just be straightforward.
I always call it a safety net.
But these are accommodations for students, and they have grown in popularity.
Yes, they have.
Right? To the chagrin of educators, really, because there are kids who need tremendous supports and help. And then there are those that have advocates and influencers in their life that can get these 504s for them. And I think sometimes there's a question, are these really necessary?
Yeah.
But they've grown.
They have.
Under this old model. And I think you could argue some of the teachers that you'll still see will argue there's too many 504s.
Yeah, they very well could. Yeah, and that's why I call them safety nets, because you haven't officially been diagnosed with something, but there's a clear problem that's happening.
So I think what I'm trying to seed here a little bit is, what is going to be interesting to see play out is not just the bad, but some of the things we have also argued, like
we want to see.
That could, yeah.
I mean, in a vacuum here of good actors, this could be framed very differently, right? Like, oh my God, like you could see this. again, it's the sweeping problems. It's some of the people involved. Like we talked about, I mean, we've been using a little bit here, but when Linda McMahon was nominated, we have like wrestling thing stuff because she was such an outside the box. There's so many questions at every part that it's like, is Elon Musk doing this so he can put like, tweet out, look how much money we saved. Let's not forget that money he's saying we saved is people's salaries who now have to contribute to the economy. Like that's the money he's saying, like, oh, we saved this much money because we fired these people who are now going to drag our economy down unless they find new jobs. But look, is he just trying to find another number to like promote? Or is this from a good place? That's a lot of people's fear too. It's like, this is an easy target. It's easy when you say we're giving it back to, Lenin took over all of Russia with a 3-word catchphrase: peace, land, bread. That's all it took. I'm going to end World War I. I'm going to make sure that all of you guys own your farms, or have the ability to farm it, and you're going to be fed. And they were like, 500 years of history and the way we do stuff. All right, we'll switch to that. And they did. They switched. And so like sometimes saying, oh, this is for your kids. Now the question is, will the states act in fidelity? Will they have these things? Are we going to start seeing, my fear out of this is the first news story that says, I hate to name a specific state because I don't want to go after, but some super red state, Texas, let's go Texas because they're never afraid. Texas has officially said biology is now out because it's up to Texas. So like we have all Texans now learn biology, like extreme thing, but when it's to the states, that could happen.
And this is I can already kind of hear the answer to this argument, but I said earlier, people vote with their feet.
Right.
People vote with their feet. If Texas makes that kind of change, move out of Texas.
Right, absolutely.
Now you're gonna say, that's such an ignorant thing to say. Some people can't.
And then you get brain
trappings
drain.
of poverty. I mean, there's all that piece. But we have seen within the last 10 years since COVID here, this exponential growth in Middle Tennessee. Right. I mean, we've seen people vote with their feet by policies and practices out of California.
Yep.
We've just seen this sweeping over the last 5 or 6 years because they're now our neighbors here. So we're hearing from that. So I wonder there would be, if it gets too radical.
Yeah. That's the way of the pendulum.
Right. Will states just start seeing, that kind of thing. But I think,
will they let it?
Rhetoric, strategy wise, what's the quickest way to get people to appeal to their emotions?
Oh yeah. Emotions.
What's the fastest way to do that in this context? Man, your kids, where do they spend the majority of their time?
School.
A regular kid,
yeah.
Right? At school. And what do you want? Don't even answer it personally. Go to Maslow's hierarchy. Well, we need base needs met, and one of those base needs is safety and security. I'm going to that rhetoric, that strategy piece. Where do your kids spend most of their time? Are they safe while they're there? Now, typically, we would think physical safety, and that is its own hot button issue.
Right, yeah.
But for a lot of folks, we're talking about psychological safety, indoctrination, what they're learning when I'm not there. So you see the strategy, man. Yeah. I mean, it's almost not even it's hard to see.
It's becoming more like, we're getting clandestine, right? We're getting like fractional, like literally, because I live in a red state, I want my kids make sure they're learning this, and now they'll do that, so it's a haven.
Yeah,
but that's not, now once you get that, the factionalism, it's bad. I mean, even Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee said a long overdue move to end indoctrination in schools. Just throwing out something that she has no stats for. You know what I mean? That she just throwing it, but that's it. People are like, no more indoctrination. So that kind of leads me to. This kind of goes with that, because a lot of people think indoctrination, a lot of people think that we've talked about some of the things. We are getting some grassroots resistance beginning. Former retired educator and retired National Education Association employee from St. Louis traveled all the way to Washington, D.C. for March 14th. There's a big rally in front of the Department of Education called Ed Matters rally, and there's tons of people there, huge signs, and he went all the way there saying like this, I couldn't not fight for something that I believe in. And it's just, again, it's that fear going on. So it kind of brings me to this, our little question about how much exactly does Department of Education do monetarily. So kind of going into our pop catalog pop quiz area here. Okay. Right, so we're going to pop catalog pop quiz, just a little question about this. So before we get back in the ring about this, let's talk about our pop quiz. So first off, popcatalog.com. Has movies, comic books, video games, old systems, some amazing original movie posters that literally have the creases in them because they were folded. Rolling them is not a thing they did there. And you can get these. So if you have an area, just go to popcatalog.com and, elevate your collection, find anything you want there. Great people. So
also looking to make some extra cash, popcatalog.com. Sell. Man, they're buying everything. Old VHSs, games, old tech, old VCRs. I mean, they're in that business too. So you've got that attic, Granny's attic, or Granny's ottoman that's got all the old tech in there.
Right.
All the old discs, CDs, DVDs, whatever it is. Get it out of your hands.
Hey, I'll tell you what. You got the old Disney movies in the snap plastic cases,
shell cases.
Those are in good condition.
Cases.
I'd look through those. And unless you got some nostalgia to it. Look at those. You can go to popcatalog.com, see what they'll offer for it, maybe get those off your hands, make a little cash. So we love those guys, appreciate them. So here's our Pop Catalog pop quiz question.
All right.
So before it shut down, the Department of Education controlled about how much of the total U.S. education budget. So this is its job. So how much of all the U.S. education budget did the Department of Education itself control? So is it, give you a little bit of multiple choice here. Is it A, 2%, B, 8%, C, 15%, or D, 25%? So how much of the total U.S. education budget do you think that it controlled?
Now, technically, kind of a misleading question. Has it shut down all the way?
Not yet, no. I mean, it's being shut down.
Laying folks off.
Right, yeah.
In the process.
It is. And Linda McMahon came up and said, the goal is to shut down the Department of Education. Here's phase 1.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to knock out A and D. I mean, I think it's just too high, too low, and get it to my 50-50, some test-taking strategies here.
Right there.
I'm going to go, with my 50-50 B and D, and I'll go with C.
Go C, 15%. All right, that's not bad. It's right there. So it's the actual answer is B, 8%. Okay, so it's 8%. Thank you at popcatalog.com for our Pop Catalog pop quiz there. So it's a big deal about shutting down the Department of Education for saving money and who wants government savings, but only 8% of total education spending. States have provided the other 92. So when we're saying this is going to the states, what's really going there, right? Like this 8%. So what did this 8% fund? It presented IDEA, which we talked about, Pell Grants for school, for college, and federal student loans. And basically now that's basically what it did. Title I, Title IX services. And the Department of Education, a big part of its funding was for the legal side, that if you applied or appealed to a Title IX for sexual harassment or for any type of sexual discrimination, or Title I for not giving services, or against, they had a big legal part that was to defend that. Defend people who are saying
I want to say OCR, Office of Civil Rights, is in there.
Office of Civil Rights in there too. So the interesting thing is the two things that were cut the most by the layoffs, right, on the March 11th layoffs of 1,300 people, the hardest hit areas were the Title IX and the OCR office. Those are the most. So literally, think about what was cut first in the Department of Education: civil rights.
Yeah.
Little scary considering U.S. history standards for most states teach about how Alabama wouldn't let people integrate.
And people sometimes will forget, too, on that Title IX piece. I mean, you're talking about gender support there. So a lot of women's rights.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
I mean will be. I know everybody wants to get hung up on trans.
Yeah, but
under that is women's rights.
Yes.
My wife's strong, independent female. I've got to shout her out here. Just women's rights significant, and any kind of safeguards taken away from them is again a major setback.
Yeah, I mean some of the things Title IX does, a lot of people think like, oh, the reason you have women's soccer at a school is because of Title IX. Yes, that says if you have the ability, you should have this so they have the same opportunities. That's what it does. But it also does things of like, hey, I want to be I want this research fellowship. Guy applies for it. Girl applies for it. Girl gets pulled aside by a professor and says, well, if you want it, maybe you could do a little something that's inappropriate to ask her to do. And before that, it was just deal with it or drop out or find a way around it. Now this is legal protection for that. Like, hey, this happened. If that goes away, could females be pushed out of science and things? Not saying there's malicious characters there, but
But again, I mean, that's speculation,
right?
In
And it's
terms
all
of what
theoretical,
could happen, because we don't know what new state level safeguards may be put in. So just a lot of speculation, a lot of uncertainty.
And that's we're just answering questions people are thinking, talking about them, because a lot of these questions roll on people's head, and luckily we have the opportunity here at Educational Warfare. Drop stuff in the comments too. Email us educationalwarfare.pod@gmail.com about how you feel about it. Like, what are some of the questions you're thinking? If we see a bunch, we'll pop up and do a little quick thing of answering those what we can and just kind of talking about it. That's what people are afraid of. So, the fallout. That's what we've been talking a little bit about. Like, can education survive without a federal system? The answer is yes, because we didn't have a Department of Education until the 70s.
Right.
Some people would say, could it survive in such a divisive landscape without a federal system? Now, that's a good question. I mean, it did. I mean, you don't want to be naive and think that, like, it's always literally, I saw this thing that was newspaper clippings, right? And we talked about this a little in our Gen Z episodes. And the headline, it was from different eras starting in like 1922. And they just jumped every 10 to 8 years. And they all said the same thing. People now just don't want to work. For every generation.
Yeah.
Right?
Man, so, right. It's timeless.
I don't want to say that politics wasn't divisive previously, but now we have everybody can get the word out there.
You've used the word like fragmented a couple of times, and I believe there's a possibility of that. I think you could also argue that the way we consume our media and the types of media, it's already fragmented.
Right.
I mean, we're already in these silos,
bubbles,
current day, in terms of, it's Sunday for me, so I just got my screen time notification. So, it's going to tell you how much, and if you really want to be transparent and vulnerable with somebody, ask them to see their screen time notification
what you're on
for the week. So, not so much how much time, but also where you spend that time.
Right.
But it's very siloed. It's very fragmented.
Yeah.
So this, to me, man, just seems in step with this trend we've already seen for how we learn, how we consume media.
Is that good?
What we consume.
Is that bad?
Yeah.
And I think we have two possible branch timelines, let's say, to go a little nerdy, that we go on. I think you could really have here, not to be, I'm not trying to be negative all the time or conspiratorial, but you could literally have state-led innovation. Like, we really could see some great things from states. And I have no doubt that some states are going to kill this, because they're going to say, okay, it's us now, so let's roll. And you're going to have some people working together. You'll have some that are worried about things. So I think you'd have state-led innovation, and the other branch you could have would be deepening inequality. Like just types of things that happen. And those are the two. I'm not saying those are the only two, but I think that could really be the branches. And I think this to me is making the 2026 midterms super interesting. How will these changes show up there voting with their feet? And we said we have a lot of people who see cut and they cheer. Yeah, we don't need that anyway. Right. But it's when you have kids here, if there's any savings, a lot of people have this misconception that if you cut something in the government, that'll like show back up in your taxes will be. No, that's not how government works. They slide it to other places. The last place the government wants extra money to go is us. Because that to them is a waste. Like, I'm going to give it to you. Like, they might give some stimulus things to spend in the economy. Hey, go spend this on this. But they're going to slide it around. So that's kind of silly. But the interesting thing, will Democrats, let's say they retake the House or something, will they fight to reinstate this in some way? Right? Or if they take back the White House in 28, do we ping pong back and forth like, no Department of Education? Now we have a Department of Education, Will in the ensuing years, do Republicans try to push as far as possible for full privatization, where it's just like, imagine a state that's a little down on its money going, we have made a contract with X company and they will run all of our educational things.
That's probably coming.
That's kind of scary, because who's this company? What's the, so all these things that are happening. So I think those are the two roads that can happen here. And a lot of these questions are out there, and it's scary. Again, as I always say, if you're a teacher, you're doing a great job already.
I don't know, but even when I hear you say it like that, and I try to take myself out of the fear, fear is the mindset killer kind of mindset there, and just think
fear is the mind killer.
Fear is the mind killer. Shout out Dune. Just hearing you kind of explain it like that, right? There are going to be some states, that rise to the occasion,
Yeah.
that innovate out of this, that are anti-fragile. I don't know. There's a piece in me that does excite me about that.
It is very
Now, the
cool.
flip side of that coin in terms of deepening inequities, exacerbating these inequalities, man, I get it, man.
Right.
It's legit. It's real. Flip side of that, though, because I just believe two things can be true simultaneously.
I agree. Yeah.
There is a side of this that's like, man, the innovation that's going to come out of this could be wild.
It could be. It very well could be. It changes the testing styles. Like maybe some states, like we're tired of doing these old ones,
Right.
Because you have the reading
when you're
standards
not
too high.
shackled, to these archaic systems with no wiggle room, no way out. Now there's some freedom to create. It's just interesting, man. So the charge is going to be right. You don't like what they're talking about. I mean, get in here,
Right. Yeah. I mean, and
innovate,
So
be
like,
an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
What is
call
your
to-
answer to this?
Call to action for teachers, right? Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job, right? Don't let this get in the way of educating students while we do for your career, because you're doing awesome at that. But you have innovative ideas. Don't be afraid to jump in. Don't be afraid to go, to run for something. If you have the ability, get your voice out there, or go up to the state representative. We're gonna have to have way more of us at the state
Right.
houses.
To that point, that's the silver lining for me. No matter which side you fall on,
It's still in your hands.
Here's the silver lining. You and I discussed this actually before we started recording. That we've actually got very juicy content to discuss in education right now.
Right.
We're not talking about scope and sequence. We're
Right.
not talking about lesson planning. We're talking about hot button topical issues that are pressing to every U.S. citizen
Yeah.
right now.
This is not just for teachers.
This is the time
Right.
to dig your heels in, get active, because we're talking about education at a very high level.
Yep.
This hasn't been done in a long time. It just hasn't.
No.
Where at least you're discussing these ideas and it's not just,
Yeah.
No, we're in this era now. It's getting a little Wild West.
Yeah.
So we've got to start, hearing these voices. Cream will rise to the top. Those people that are willing to say, nope, I'm not settling for this. Nope, we're going to push back against that. And since some of these scaffolding is off, the structures aren't as rigid anymore, going to be some innovation that comes out of that, man.
Yeah, and I say, what I think we're building this from the ground up with states. So if this is what they want, right, to build, like the states are taking over. One, I would say as parents, teachers, even community members, grab on early, make your voice known early, and don't be afraid to critique while it's happening, because if your state's kind of going on this is looking sketchy for whatever reason, don't wait till it's down the gutter till you say something, because then it's too hard to fix. Let them know. And if you're whatever political side you fall on, don't be afraid to criticize your own people while they're doing this. That's called constructive criticism. You don't go along with them because, well, I voted blue, so I don't care what they do. It's always right. No, say, nope. Change this. Change this now. I don't like it, and do that. And if we're doing that, then we have a better chance. But get involved, get locally, make your voices heard. If there are any negative actors, the number one thing they want is capitulation through silence. We don't know what to say. We're not important enough. We won't say anything. And then before you know it, it's too hard to stop it. You're gonna have to tear it all down. So get active early. There's already some legal groups are already using the law to make sure things are done right, to pause some firings, to make sure systems don't just shut down. It's like there is, teachers can do that locally, get involved with, pay attention, see what's happening. All of these representatives have emails. They have phone numbers. You can call them. Please, don't do any or say anything crazy that's still against the law. Give them your honest opinion. Be cordial. This is still politics. It's not a blood fight. And use that. Parents and stuff, pay attention. Again, right. It starts local, but don't be afraid to call your state senator, your state rep, the governor. Like, flood them with stuff. That is how our voice is heard. If we sit back, it's too late. So there's a lot of changes going on. Like I said, it's topical. It is, it's what's happening. It is, what could this mean? It could be good. It could be bad. We're not trying to make a prediction. We're just kind of throwing out the things out there. So I think it could be an exciting time, but it also can be very scary. You see it, and the biggest fear I have is that we start having
and let us know that in the comments. Is it a scary time? Is it an exciting time? And tell us why. Is it scary? Is it exciting? And give us a why. Would love to hear that.
Yeah.
From our viewers on this. Man, it's been a heavy topic again, but a part 2 that I think was necessary. Again, still kind of wait and see for
It is,
me.
yeah.
We
just
I
wanted
get
to-
it, but
Yeah, we wanted to talk about it while it's fresh. So some of you guys are thinking about that and maybe throw out an idea you were having. If anything else crazy happens, we'll obviously keep going with this. But like I said, please let us know. It's been great being here. It's been great talking about this, being able to do this. It's a great mental exercise for us because we come into it and like live during the show, our sometimes our ideas change sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's what's beautiful about it. We're all just kind of doing this together and you have us here. So check out our other episodes on charter schools, on vouchers, on the curriculum wars. We have stuff that is all pertinent to this. And the things that are changed. So check it out on our YouTube channel. And so, hey, the bell's rung on the Department of Education. It's ding ding, but the fight's just beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can shape this ourselves. So, we really appreciate everybody being here from beautiful Cadet Toys and Comics, and for Tommy Ruth, for Dr. Ryan Jackson, for Matt Paff. I'm Dr. Jordan Lauer. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being a part of the fight.